1 picosecond later.
1 nanosecond later.
Millisecond later. 1 second later.
2 seconds later.
3 seconds later.
8.88 seconds later.
10 seconds later.
20 seconds later.
30 seconds later.
45 seconds later.
1 minute later.
2 minutes later.
3 minutes later.
5 minutes later.
7.5 minutes later.
10 minutes later. 15 minutes later.
20 minutes later.
25 minutes later.
30 minutes later.
45 minutes later.
1 hour later.
1.5 hours later.
2 hours later. 3 hours later.
5 hours later.
6 hours later. 10 hours later.
12 hours later.
15 hours later.
15 hours later.
1 day later.
1.75 days later. 2 days later.
3 days later.
3.5 days later. 1 week later.
3.5 weeks later.
5 weeks later.
Fortnight later.
1.5 fortnights later. To fortnights later.
1 month later.
3 months later.
6 months later.
9 months later.
11 weeks later.
1 year later. 5 years later. 1 decade later.
5 decades later.
7.5 decade later.
1 century later.
3 centuries later.
1 millennium later.
5 millennium later.
1 giganum later.
30 steps later.
Some videos later.